And we are live. Hello and welcome to Alfresco Tech Talk Live. Today I'm joined by Luis Cabaceira. Today we'll be talking about performance tuning of your Alfresco installation. First, I have a few announcements. The first one is that office hours with the user assistant team has been moved into October. And Richard is still putting down all the details. So the next office hours will be in September with John Newton. We are collecting questions for this event. So if you have any questions for John, be sure to send them to community@alfresco.com or at the Google Plus events page, or reach out to either Richard or me online. The next community edition release is scheduled to go out later this month. We're planning a series of community edition releases over the rest of the year, but we do expect the next one to go out by the end of this month, and we're really eager to hear the feedback on that. So I think that's just about the announcements I have for today. Yes, welcome, Luis. Luis, you are one of our senior consultants at Alfresco, and maybe you could introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Luis Cabaceira. As Solr said, I'm from Alfresco Consulting. I've been doing consulting in Alfresco for nearly 3 years. Before I was an open text consultant, and before that Vignette, but always doing consulting in accounts across EMEA and some of them worldwide, on the US and so forth. And today I'm here to share with you my experiences on the field by assisting and helping customers on their Alfresco implementations, and what I've seen through all these years, and the common mistakes and the common problems, and how to address those problems, and what is the best way to attack or troubleshoot possible problems on your Alfresco installation. We will also be discussing the tuning patterns, where can we tune, how should we tune, and hopefully I will take you to a little bit of my day-to-day experience while helping Alfresco customers on their deployments. So with no further ado, I think I will start the presentation. Let me share my screen, and let me know if everything is okay, if you can hear me and see the screen okay, right?
Yeah. And as always, if you have questions, be sure to post them on the Google Plus page or on ISE, and I'll make sure to circle back and we cover those questions. So, Luis, I have fixed the monitor on your screen, and we see your slides just perfectly. And I'll go on mute and hand the word over to you.
Okay. So, yeah, this tech talk is about. I've already spoken a little bit about me, so we can skip this slide. Let's just check the agenda for today. So we will start with some general best practices on tuning and how to configure your Alfresco deployment for your use case. Then we will see some of the common mistakes that I've been finding throughout the field. And we will also take a look at sizing and what to expect from a single server running Alfresco and Solr on the same server machine with some specific specs that we will discuss later on. Then we will speak a little bit about Solr tuning and Solr cache tuning as well. We will afterwards look at some GVM tuning hints, tips and tricks. Then on stage 6 of the presentation, we will speak a little bit about the caches, mostly repository caches that previous to version 4.2 were handled by Hazelcast, by EHCache, and now we are using Hazelcache. And last but not least, we will check when your Alfresco is running slow, where should you start your troubleshooting efforts, and how to detect the problem and possibly fix it. So one of the best practices I've found and I'm normally implementing customers is, first, of course, we need to analyze the use case that the customer is trying to implement, and we need to see what kind of processes, file systems, and components are being used. Normally, customers that they don't use some of the, for example, virtual file systems, CIFS and NFS, they are never used in conjunction, or CIFS and WebDAV, for example. But the customers tend to have all of this enabled. So disabling the parts that you're not using of the platform can save on very important resources and free those resources for other parts of the application. So if you're not using CIFS, you can disable FTP, WebDAV, NFS, IMAP. If you're not using thumbnails, there are customers that they don't use thumbnails, they just use Alfresco as a repository for documents, and they don't use Alfresco Share at all. But we've seen that most of the customers, that they keep generating thumbnails and previews. So if you're not generating or making usage of thumbnails or previews, we can disable that. So to cut a long story short, we should disable everything that we are not using and not relying on, okay, the platform offers me this, let me keep it up and running before I might use it in the future. So here the rule is, if you're not using it, disable it. Also, the cloud sync features that are enabled by default, you should disable it specifically by configuring your Alfresco global properties to disable everything that you're not using. So if you're not using any of the cloud sync features or hybrid features of Alfresco, just disable all the sync services. Again, user quotas, also important, because Alfresco, to check the user quotas, it introduced some overloads to the main processing engine. So if you're not using user quotas, we might as well disable this feature in order to prevent Alfresco from having to check every user for his quota. So, and the activities feed, this is one of the dashboards that everybody's used to see on Share. But some customers, they don't use it. So if you're not using the activities feed, or you don't find any business usages for the activity feed, recommendation is also to disable it. By doing all this in one go, and considering that there's some of these services that you can disable and are actually here enabled, you already increase the performance of your system by releasing important resources. So next slide is a set of golden rules for the repository. So this is experience from the field, and what we know when customers were complaining about slowness and had really slow systems. So these golden rules can help when possible to apply them to increase the overall speed of your repository. So limit the group hierarchy to 5 level deep. This means groups inside groups. We know from our internal benchmarks and also from understanding how the product works and how do we check permissions on the nodes, we know that having a group hierarchy more than 5, it's considered to be a fairly complex permission group hierarchy that can lead to longer queries while checking ACLs. So if we can limit the group hierarchy or the nested group hierarchy to 5, use a permission inheritance based module, meaning that try not to apply permissions to the node itself, but try to inherit permissions from the parent folder, and try to use the inheritance to the most level that you can. Also, limit the number of nodes on a single folder, on a single parent folder. We know, and recently I've been handling 2 of these programs in different customers that had a very big number of nodes under the same parent. This not only causes a very slow response time while browsing that node. This is the typical scenario. You're trying to browse a node with a lot of nodes and it's slow. So Alfresco Share or any other UI, it's responding slow, and it's taking some time to get you the contents and the node list. This is basically because we do ACL checks on every node, and checking the ACLs on a parent folder with more than, let's say, 5,000 items becomes costly, and the query is really, really big, and that has an impact on performance. So if we can have a clever approach to how do we distribute our nodes towards our hierarchy on our repository, we can gain on performance. So there were also another use cases that customer had a print service that was printing everything onto the same folder, and that folder was not being reorganized, so it ended up with more than 500,000 nodes, and that just became unbearable for the customer and for the whole application. So the solution on that case, we needed to run a script on the repo to divide or to produce a new hierarchy of folders, parent-child associations, and that resulted on, of course, increased performance, and now they are stable. So this is another justification to try to apply these rules on not having a huge number of nodes under the same parent. Have a certain degree of control on the number of sites that you spin on your Alfresco repository. Mostly of the collaboration scenarios and implementations that I've seen, they are site-based. So every department, they create a site for the department, they create a site for cooperating with external partners and all that. But on some cases, the creation of sites became like creating a node, and that's not the case, because having a huge number of sites inside Alfresco, there is not a hard limit on the number of sites that you can have. But what I can say is that having too much sites without needing to create that many sites can introduce unnecessary overhead on the overall performance and activities that Alfresco has to do to verify sites memberships, for example. The My Sites dashlet is a good example of this, where the number of sites can have a negative influence on the performance rendering the Alfresco Share dashboard, because that specific dashlet, it needs to do a query on the database. It's a very big query to verify the membership of the logged in user on how many sites does it belong to list those sites. So on several occasions, just by removing this dashlet on a such use case where there were thousands of sites, it changed completely the behavior of Alfresco and increased a lot of the performance. So this rule is also important. If you don't need to have 10,000 sites, just keep it to a fairly realistic number. Keep a low ratio on the user group membership. That's also important. If you have a user or users belonging to many groups, or you're just synchronizing for your LDAP repository as is, and you just synchronize a huge number of branches, but actually you don't use all those branches and all those group memberships inside Alfresco. So if we can keep this to a low ratio, that will also be a performance factor that will contribute to better performance. And again, like we referred before about the number of nodes on the same parent folder, we should also limit the depth of the folder hierarchy, meaning that if we have a very big and long folder hierarchy, it will have an impact on performance, on search performance, on browsing performance. So, and any questions until now before we go to the next slide, please?
Was one question on the previous slide. You had something about home folder creations, and Bindo asks if we have any information on any link for disabling eager creation of home folders. Maybe that's something you could just elaborate on. If you go back one slide, I think you had one bullet item on or the next one, I think. That one.
Yeah, actually we have. I know I have Bindo on my Skype list, so I can ping Bindo with how to disable the eager creation of home folders.
Maybe you could just put a few words into what this means, eager creation of home folders.
Okay, so basically the creation of home folders of the users, it happens exactly when you create the user. So Alfresco creates a home folder for each new user automatically. There are cases that the new users are not utilizing this folder for any business-related tasks. So disabling this eager creation of home folders can save on resources, and also can prevent Alfresco from creating containers that are not going to be used in the future. So yeah, to disable this is just a configuration.
Okay, great.
So where were we?
I think there was one more question, just scanning through. Bindu says, I think the link was wrong. We'll pick that one up and make sure you get the right link for that one. I have a question about any lower limits after which performance degrades. Has to do with a lower, let me see, what was the thread here? If there's any lower limit on sites.
No, there is, as I said before, there is no known limit or hard limit. We run already benchmarks with more than 20,000 sites with no problems, but we were simulating just a specific use case. So I guess it will depend on under which use case are those sites created and how are they being accessed. So there's no, but the question is no, there's no hard limit for the definition of the number of the max number of sites that should be present on an Alfresco repo.
Yep, got it.
So any more questions?
Not for this round, not yet. Otherwise, I'll circle back to it later.
Sure. So let me continue. So common mistakes. This is like chapter 2 of the presentation. So this is some of the common mistakes I found when I was visiting or helping customers on site towards my consulting practice. So one of those is not keeping the extended configurations and customizations on a separate or controlled directory. One of the options to do this is, of course, to use the shared classes of Tomcat and maintain all the configurations and extensions there. But again, as part of a reliable release management and application lifecycle mechanism, that can also be controlled inside of the deployment process, and that can end up either on an AMP or directly on the final artifact. But well, some of the customers that I visit, they had absolutely no control on the extended configurations and customizations, and when they tried to upgrade, they lost everything because there were manual deploys inside the web application on the extension folder. They were not following an AMP-based deployment scenario, and so this is one of the common errors that I face when I visit some customers, and I had a big amount of trouble or finding out what was there before and after, comparing WAR files, opening zip files. So yeah, this is the most annoying mistake that I normally see. So another is when we ask customers, do you have a backup in place? Yeah, we have a backup. Everyone seems to have a backup and a strategy defined. But when comes the time when you really need to restore from a backup, either because you're on quality assurance during some kind of tests or trying to fix a problem on a code level, or whatever that might potentially break the database, when you try to restore from a backup, not always the backup procedure have been tested, and I would say at least 40% of the times it fails, and it led to other problems. Another one is insufficient monitoring and insufficient troubleshooting tools. So sometimes I get on site and everybody's complaining that the system is really, really slow. And when I start asking questions, okay, so how is the database behavior? How is the CPU? How is the memory? How is this process? How are the threads? And there's no information whatsoever. So if we don't have appropriate monitoring on top of our deployment, it's it's much more difficult for us to troubleshoot any possible mistake and to pinpoint where is the error coming from. So monitoring is very important to have in place, inclusively on production system, having in consideration that some monitoring can introduce some overload, but the appropriate monitoring for production system is absolutely vital on my opinion. One of the other common mistakes is trying to make changes or fix things directly on production, because production is failing, or production has this or that problem, and everybody seems eager to deploy everything directly on production to try to fix it, and that's one of the biggest mistakes for me. Actually, this drills down to having a quality assurance environment that is an absolute or a more reliable copy of production as possible. That will facilitate a lot of fixing, troubleshooting, and also predictions while executing benchmarks and so forth. So this is another common mistake that I've seen. Not, I would say, from 100% percentage of the clients that I visit, I would say that only 20% will have a quality assurance environment that is a reliable copy of production. Some of those that actually have copies of their repository on quality assurance, which make things a lot easier from testing, troubleshooting, upgrading. Every perspective is much more easy when you have a reliable quality assurance performance testing environment.
One question that came up on RSC is any suggestions for monitoring tools?
Yeah, we will speak a little bit about this later on the presentation. I will show you some really simple monitoring tools that we offered for free that are available on GitHub and also on Alfresco head-ons. So let me get back to that question later on the presentation. I will not forget to reply, okay?
Excellent.
So another common mistake is forgetting to adjust system sizing for increased users and sessions. So when normally consulting goes on site is like to put out the fire. Everything is already burning, everything is on fire, it's very slow, users are complaining, Alfresco is not good. But most of those cases, and when that is related to increased usage of the system, the customer has sized the system for a particular use case and for a specific number of concurrent users or user base, and that user base has grown as the business grow, but the sizing was not adjusted for those levels of concurrency. So system becomes slow. We need to find the bottleneck. We need to help the customer to overcome that. Most of the times it includes some architectural changes. Some other times it includes just plain tuning of the existing resources, increasing database connection pool or decreasing, tuning the max threads on Tomcat. This also means increase or decrease depending on the use case. The tuning of the GVM, the enabling of the garbage collection logs, and a deep analysis on the garbage collection behavior of the GVM, both of Alfresco and Solr, or in the case they are living on the same GVM, so doing a joint analysis. And another mistake that is drilled down of this one is, of course, to forget running the benchmarks and stress tests to predict the amount of resources that would be necessary for increased load on the deployment. What else? Yeah, another very common mistake that I see is customers using a shared database server for Alfresco and for a million other applications. So when things start to get really slow, and we by the information that we have, we see that it's related with the database. When we try to see what percentage of the database or what resources of the database is Alfresco occupying, it's very difficult, because it's a common instance. It's serving a lot of other applications, and it becomes really hard to troubleshoot. Also, on most of the enterprise deployments, I think it makes sense to use a dedicated database server and engine just for Alfresco, not having a shared server for more than one or more projects. So another mistake is some network and infrastructure constraints. I would say 30% of the time there's also network and infrastructure constraints. Either is the load balancer that is not functioning correctly, either is the firewall rule that is not set correctly, either is the Apache that doesn't have enough connections for the amount of concurrency that, well, so actually infrastructural or networking constraints that are not related with Alfresco whatsoever. And last but not least, one of the common mistakes is customers that have deployed unsupported hardware or software versions, unsupported JVMs, 32 bits JVMs, unsupported databases, and so forth. What else? On code mistakes, well, this is the biggest topic. We could discuss this for a long time, but
we could probably do a complete Tech Talk live just on this topic alone. But
yeah. I want to keep it really short. So the common mistakes, I'm really just trying to point out the most common mistakes that I find on every code review that I do. So one of the most common and that have more impact is not closing the search result sets or any result set whatsoever on try catch finally blocks. This leads to memory leaks, as these resources will keep hanging there and not being released. So they will be on memory until you restart. I have visited customers saying, we restart Alfresco 4 times a day. And every time we restart, it behaves good, but then, we have to restart again. Well, when we start analyzing the code or what's causing this necessity of restarting is because the memory is not releasing, garbage collection is not happening, and most of the times it's because of poor customization code, and on top of that customization code, not closing the resources appropriately. So second, the incorrect usage of policies and behaviors. As you all know, policies and behaviors are a very important and strong feature of Alfresco, but they need, since they are so powerful and they run on such a low level of the platform, any mistake done on this type of code can have drastic performance impact on the overall platform. So advice on policies and behaviors, use them to the best of your knowledge, but make sure they are performing well and the code is really good, really good. I have engaged with customers that they have different partners working on different parts of the project, and both of the partners, they were doing policies on the same event and behavior on the same event, and there were some conflicts. And those were really hard to track on our side. And then when we found out and we fixed it, so this was the root cause: collisions on policies and behaviors. This is why they are here. It's really important to make sure that that code is really good and performing. Another one is the use of lowercase versions of the Alfresco service beans. So those beans that the first name starts with a lowercase letter. Those beans are configured to bypass Alfresco security, transaction, and they also bypass auditing checks. There will be some persistence but incurrent rumors on the Alfresco community that this version of the service beans are performing better than the official uppercase versions of the same beans. Well, I can guarantee you that's not the case. That's not been the case since Alfresco 3, and lowercase beans, using those beans is highly discouraged from my perspective. So use uppercase beans on all time. They are transaction safe, and they can prevent a lot of problems. Also, things that I've seen on some customers that are directly accessing the Alfresco database, not using the Spring or the existing DAOs, but using direct access by JDBC, which doesn't make any sense while working with a product such as Alfresco, or in fact, while working behind a Spring implementation. So this is a common mistake as well. And the usage of private APIs, I've seen a lot out there. APIs that are not supported by Alfresco to be used as public or extended. Those are a lot common mistakes by customers using those private APIs to implement their business use cases. Any question?
I don't think there's any questions on this topic. Bindu has a comment, just going to read out loud. For rescue projects, we've run into folks not closing file handles, similarly to not closing result sets, resulting in running out of file handles. So if we see Alfresco vanishing after a roughly predictable period of time, we look at unclosed result sets and for unclosed file handlers and for memory config in the JVM. So there's some good advice right there. It doesn't just apply to result sets, also file handles. Remember to release the resources as you are using them. It's really something you need to do.
Exactly, very important, and one very common mistake. So yeah, moving on to the next slide. I don't want to bother you too much on technical details. I promise just this last 2 bullet points. So one that is very important and cannot go without saying is don't use transaction service. We find a lot of customers using transaction service instead of using the retrying transaction helper. This is, as the name implies, the retrying transaction helper contains retry logic for certain recoverable and expected database exceptions, deadlocks, basically. So it also uses Spring's template pattern to ensure a transaction is always completed, committed, or rolled back correctly. This is regardless of what happened in the logic inside the transaction. Using the raw transaction service provides neither of these benefits, and for that reason, I don't consider it safe, and you shouldn't use that on any of your extensions. But unfortunately, we've seen this on the field being used by a lot of customers, but the message is don't use the retrying transaction helper. That's the way to go. Don't use transaction service directly. Next bullet point is not using the CMIS query language when using the search service. Well, as you know, the Alfresco Search Service API, it supports different languages, so XPath, Lucene, Solr, and CMIS, which roughly correlate to the different underlying search implementations in Alfresco. One of the languages, of course, is CMS. CMS is fully abstracted away from the underlying implementation, and that's the only language that will provide some guarantee of consistent behavior, even if you change the implementation. So this is not a must, it's just an advice. When possible, when using the search service, try to use the CMIS query language when possible. And last but not least, improper exception handling. We've seen a lot of these, catching exceptions and not doing anything with the exception. So in my opinion, exception should be either caught or recovered from, or allowed to float up the call stack. It's almost never appropriate to swallow an exception or catch it without doing anything. And excessive wrapping of exceptions inside other exceptions should be minimized. This is not what we've seen on the field, so this is why this is here as another advice for extensions. I'm not bothering you more with technical details. So let's move forward. Any question on this slide?
Bindu notes that lowercase service beans are not in the public API, and that's true. Lowercase services are private, and you should not be using them. He also notes that retrying transaction helper is evil with a smiley, but of course they'll use it. So I'm not. It sounds like there's a backstory. I don't know there, but let's carry on before time starts running up from us.
Yeah. Okay. So sizing, what to expect from a single serve. This would be a short conversation actually, and because we have more topics to cover, and each one of these topics we could easily speak for much longer time. So let's assuming that you are running Alfresco on a single server with the following hardware, having a Red Hat 64 bits with 16 GB of RAM, 2 quad-core CPUs, so meaning 8 cores, of 3.2 GB and a local SSD. And assuming that you are running Alfresco repo, the share, and Solr on the same machine, and according to our internal benchmarks and highly dependent on the specifics of each use case, this service should be able to serve or to handle 200 concurrent requests or up to 2,000 casual users with the appropriate tuning and options in place. So what will affect the sizing and the architecture that you should use for your project? So the use case, of course, the number of concurrent users, the document types, sizings, and distribution ratios, the architecture of choice. Are you using virtualization? Are you using physical machines, barebone? Should the architecture be fail-safe? Are you using replication, integration with third-party components? What is the component stack? Authority structure, the percentage of operations, read, write, search, the components, protocols, and APIs that will be used, the batch operations, so bulk import, and also the schedule tasks or custom schedule tasks that will run on top of the deployment, and response time requirements. All of these will influence the sizing and the architecture that you can define for a deployment on each specific use case. Last year, I was on the Alfresco Summit in both London and San Francisco. I did a presentation on sizing. So if you want to drill down any of these topics, just search for the presentation. Everything about sizing is on that presentation, and we will be releasing, Alfresco, an official sizing document pretty soon as well. So I don't think it makes much sense to continue on these topics. So basically, these are the facts that will affect the sizing of your architecture. So normally there's two use cases for defining sizing. Either it's a cooperation use case where users cooperate to departments, they share files, they cooperate on projects. And there's another use case which Alfresco is used as a backend repository. So when I'm out there visiting customers, either I find one or the other, and sometimes a mix of both. So some customers use Alfresco as just a backend repository to hold the documents, and they implement a vertical solution in front of Alfresco. They don't even use Alfresco Share, most of these customers. They normally use just one user to access the repository. So it's completely different use case, collaboration from a backend repository. Again, we can discuss, or you can see much more information on all these variables on the sizing presentation of the summit last year. So I'm not going to speak much more about sizing and the use cases, okay?
There was one question on sizing on the slide where you had the dedicated server, one server. There were some questions about the amount of RAM, the memory. You have 16 gigs listed on for the single server setup. Is that equally divided between repository share? Does that include the database?
No. This doesn't include the database. The database sits on a totally different server. This is just a server that is running Alfresco, Share, and Solr on the same Tomcat.
Okay, and the server has 16 gigs of RAM. How much would be allocated to the JVM?
To the JVM would be 12 gigs maximum. So because we need to leave enough space for the operating system and also for the disk cache to be able to use the server RAM to hold some objects. So I wouldn't recommend to setting a JVM more than 12 gigabytes. So I would say 12 gigabytes, properly tuned, of course.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, as I was saying, we're getting ahead on time, so I will not go too deep on sizing. So again, see my presentation on the last summit. It contains all the information. There's a document out there as well. So just want to stress this this little, well, topic. Actually, it's I call it divide and conquer, meaning when you know your architecture and your deployment, and you know when, where, and what are the processes that are running on your server or servers, and you know what resources are those processes influencing, you can start by dividing work, meaning you can have a dedicated Alfresco node just for the scheduled tasks and for the bulk import actions configured specifically for those tasks, while you can have two user-facing nodes that are configured specifically to attend user requests and are not taking care of scheduled tasks, are not taking care of transformations, for example, or any other process that we can offload to different servers. So actually, what I'm trying to say is Alfresco as a platform is very elastic. It allows you to configure to be configured on a very different amount of ways. So if you know your use case, if you know your architecture, you can start to doing this division of work. I've achieved really good results by isolating most of the tasks that I knew that for example, the user-facing Alfrescos shouldn't do, so saving resources to do other things. One clear example of this is when we spin up a dedicated tracking Alfresco slave on the Solr server. So let's imagine we have a Solr server on an independent box, but that Solr was communicating with Alfresco towards the network with the front-end Alfrescos to do the tracking and to do the transformation. So Alfresco, the front-end nodes would have to do the transformation, the text extraction, all of those tasks. When we change the architecture slightly by introducing a new Alfresco node on the same box as Solr, we not only gain by having a local tracking, as that instance is dedicated to as a slave of Solr to all indexing and tracking processes, but also to perform the text extraction of the documents when the transformations occur. As you know, when we are full text indexing and we upload the document into Alfresco, the contents of that document, the text, needs to be extracted and it's sent to Solr as a text file. So if this work is being done by the front-end nodes of Alfresco, if there's a lot of uploads, there is a lot of increase on resource usage just by doing this transformation or text extraction. So by spinning up this dedicated tracking instance, we gain local tracking, we avoid network communication, but we also release the Alfresco front-end service from doing text extraction on some of the documents. So let's continue. In order to know when, where, and what are the processes that are running on our deployment, and what are they doing, and what resources of the server are those processes influencing, we need to have the appropriate monitoring. And this also replies to the question before, what are good monitoring solutions? So the best one and the most robust is this one from Miguel Rodriguez, that I have the link here. You can go to GitHub, Miguel Rodriguez. There's a whole solution for Alfresco monitoring. It's delivered as chef receipt, so you can actually build a VM that contains everything that you need to do a fully monitorization solution. It uses a lot of tools such as Elasticsearch, Kibana, Grafana. It uses iSinger for notifications. It uses, it has a lot of open source tools, so it's an open source stack of tools that at the end of the day provide you with a very robust monitoring solution for Alfresco. A very simple approach, I will try to demo this to you. Let's see if this works. It's just installing Java Melody on your Alfresco. It's really, really simple to install. And when you install Java Melody, you get this type of statistics. It's no more than deploying a jar file on the library of Tomcat, and you get these statistics for free. So this is a very simple monitoring solution, but also very, very easy to set up to have all this data within Alfresco. It contains a lot of relevant information when you're trying troubleshooting. You can get details on the errors, on the requests. You can get the times of each request. How long are they taking? What is the request that is taking the longest time? And you can evaluate and troubleshoot depending on the information that you get here on real time. Also, you can get SQL statistics. I have not enabled mine, but this can be enabled, where you can see the heaviest queries and the longest queries that Alfresco is executing. You also can see the errors that are showing on the logs here. As you can see, so only the last 100 errors are displayed. So this is a basic monitoring solution, but actually it's basic, but it shows mostly everything that we need to know on a production environment, and this is not very intrusive from resource consumption. So if you don't, start with Java Melody, and then if you want to have a more robust monitoring solution, just implement the monitoring of Miguel Rodriguez on GitHub, which is really, really, really good and really easy to admin, and also it provides really relevant information. Let me see if I can get back here. Whoa, where were we? So, yeah, here. Any doubt regarding Java Melody, the monitoring solution of Miguel Rodriguez?
It doesn't seem like it. So
okay.
Continue.
Again, one very nice tool also for troubleshooting, it's the support tools. It's an AMP that you can get on Share Extras. It's free of charge, doesn't have any licenses, but it helps you a lot doing troubleshooting. As you can see, I've installed on my system here the support tools, and what support tools can give you is the number of active sessions on the database and on your system. You can see the hot threads, so what are the hot threads running on your system and what are they doing. It's good when you are trying to troubleshoot, for example, a CPU starvation, or all threads are occupied, everyone is waiting for the resources, so we have timeouts. So looking at these thread reports can give you a first hint of what might be going on with your system. You can also extract a thread dump. Here you have a thread profiler embedded. You don't need to extract the threads and analyze it elsewhere. You can analyze it directly on the admin console of Alfresco with this extension. You have the thread sampler. This is also a very, 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 very nice feature, the log4j settings. Here, you can change a specific log4j class without having to restart Alfresco for a specific time or a specific period that you want to analyze. Let's say that you're having a program now in production. Everything is really, really slow. And you need to enable the log of transformations, but you don't want to restart the server. You cannot restart, it's production. So you can come here, you can change any of the log files or classes that you want, and you can set it to debug without having to restart Alfresco. And then you can see immediately the debug logs on the Alfresco log, and you can, of course, when you see the information that you were looking for, you can disable the debug logging, this without restarting Alfresco. I think it's a very good advantage, and I use this tool a lot when I'm troubleshooting everything, because I don't need to restart. I can just take a look directly of what's happening in production, and again, the overload on the system is nearly nothing.
This tool, is this available for enterprise only, or is it available for community edition as well?
I'm not sure. This tool is available as an open source add-on, so it's available to everyone. What I'm not sure is that if the community version has this admin console or all the features of the admin console. I know that community, for example, you cannot cluster, so probably you don't have access to the cluster tests and all this, right? So this will not be available on the community edition. So I'm not sure if support tools. So probably Bidu, he knows if the community edition has this console fully blown or not.
We'll get back on that one. I don't know myself, but yeah, some of these things should be available, but some of the things are enterprise only. But we'll have to circle back to that one.
Yeah. Another really nice tool is the scheduled jobs list. So you have a list of all the scheduled jobs instead of going and opening JConsole or another GMX tool and see the bins and circle to the Alfresco bins to get to the scheduled tasks and to be able to execute them and take a look at at when are they executing. You can actually see the list of scheduled jobs here on using support tools, and you can execute any of those scheduled jobs on demand. For example, content store cleaner or the LDAP synchronization, on any of the scheduled jobs, you can execute them directly here on the console. You can, every time you open a ticket to support or the customer support asks you for a GMX dump, it allows you to do a GMX dump here directly as well. And the test transformation system, I don't know if this is out of the box or not. Anyhow, this is the add-on, the support tools that I was referring on the presentation. What else? Demo support tools done. Yeah, again, the divide and conquer, having specific servers dedicated to specific tasks has always helped on the changes or architectural changes that we've done on the field in order to recover from performance problems or research outage or starvation. So if we have, what I'm trying to say here is, if you have 5 servers, use them all wisely and try to divide the work that you can between the 5 servers. You can take more of your resources. Offload user-facing nodes, we already discussed this. So capacity planning, it's a very nice and also one thing that is very, very important is to be able to do a capacity planning on your system, to predict what kind of changes do you need to do on your deployment in order to meet future workload or usage growth expectations. And having this solution in place, so actually this diagram here shows how should a capacity planning being implemented. It's an ongoing exercise. It relies on having accurate monitoring information available, captured from production. And it basically, when you have all this, and see that Java Melody is here, but it's also Grafana, Isinga for notifications, Logstash to capture the data and all that, and archive everything on Elasticsearch. This is actually what the Miguel Rodriguez solution is doing, is aggregating each and one of those into a unified solution, allowing you for easily not only monitor your resources, but also to support your capacity planning exercise. Well, in my opinion, and when I'm asked to do capacity planning for a customer, we provide or we implement a set of tools that is basically, they are based on custom benchmarks that we execute. Then we analyze the benchmark results and the monitoring results that we have on the benchmark server, and we compare the impact of the stress tests with the resources that we have on production. And actually that allows us to extrapolate and to try to predict what would be necessary to cope with future loads, including all the variables. So capacity planning is a really nice tool to help on sizing for future usages of the system. So this slide is about monitoring and what resources are we monitoring and how. Basically, this is common information, I'm sure, for most everyone that's on the call. So monitor your search performance, the GVM metrics, CPU, garbage collection threads, your index content, and how healthy is your index, how are the merge processing executing, do we have enough free space on our indexes disk to do the merging properly, how is my database performing, so query performance, blocking queries, slow queries, how are my caches performing, cache hits, the cache ratios, the cache loads, active caches, all of that, and the repository statistics that we obtain from monitoring. So regarding Solr tuning, I'm going to give you some of the golden rules for Solr tuning that I've also learned towards experience. So first we need to, I think we should do like an exercise of doing a series of questions. Do you really need to search on deleted content? I've come to a very big number of customers that they had the archive core enabled. They were indexing all deleted content, but no one was using that content for anything. There was no business need to index deleted content, but it was there since ever. So that core of Solr grew a lot in gigabytes. It generated a huge index that actually was not used by anyone. So if you're not using or not searching over deleted content and you have any business requirements that justify having this core enabled, you can safely disable the archive core and working only with the workspaces spaces store core of Solr, which is the core that is responsible for indexing live content. To disable the archive core is just going to Solr Home, edit an XML file, comment it out the archive core, and of course you will also need to disable the schedule task that triggers the archive core backup schedule task on Alfresco. That's done also via configuration on the Alfresco global properties. You just set a new cron to normally what we do is we set the archive core backup to a very far away date in the future, like 2200 or something like that, in order to guarantee that the backup isn't fired and that we are not using the archive core at all. Another question is, do you search on content or the text content of your documents, or you only search metadata? I would say that at least 40% of my customers, they only search on metadata. The remaining, they search on content and on text inside content. But on those 40% of the customers that I visit, they were indexing everything. They were indexing full text indexing. And by realizing that they didn't search inside content and disabling full text indexing, they saved a lot of, well, resources, space, and they reduced a lot their index size, and it contributed to increased performance as well. So if that, in order to disable the full text indexing of content, you just create a property on Alfresco global properties called Alfresco index transform content, and you set it to false. On those specific situations where you're only searching for metadata, you can make use of one of the new features of Alfresco. I think it's been there since Alfresco 4.2x, which is named transactional metadata queries. And that instructs, when that is configured, that instructs Alfresco that some of the queries that for metadata that Alfresco can use the database directly to get the results, Alfresco will go directly to the database and not relying on hitting Solr for those metadata values. And when the database is hit, so when the query is compatible with the transactional metadata queries, it's much faster than going through and searching the Solr index. So yeah. Another question.
There was one question about disabling the archive store. Is if you disable the archive store, will the trash bin continue to work normally, or what's the consequences of doing this?
The trash can will still work.
So you'll still be able to restore stuff, but you'll not be able to search for anything in it.
Exactly. The aim is just to prevent indexing deleted content.
Got it. I should also say that we are really behind schedule. We have 2 minutes left. I'm good to let it go 10 more minutes, but yeah. We expect people to hang around more than 10 more minutes over time. So just to let you know, maybe we need to split it up and do a part 2 of the talk, but I'll give you 10 more minutes to see if you can.
I'll try to speed it up. I always have this problem in presentations. Sorry, guys. I don't know how much time do I need. So yeah, another question. Do you really need SSL between Alfresco and Solr? As you know, SSL is configured by default. So Alfresco communicate with Solr and vice versa by SSL. If you're inside your intranet on a controlled environment and you don't need this extra security, disabling the SSL have proven to reduce complexity and increase the communication speed between Alfresco and Solr. Another golden rule for Solr: optimize your ACL policy. Try to reuse your permissions and use inheritance and use groups to the best of your knowledge. Golden rules for Solr indexing. This is just for the indexing. So we will cover golden rules for indexing and golden rules for search. So for indexing, have local indices. Don't use any shared folders, NFS. Use fast hardware like RAID or SSD. This is actually valid also for searching. So the fastest the disk where your indexes are, the fast will the overall performance be. Merge factor ideal for indexing is 25. So you can use 25 while you're indexing, while the merge factor of 2 is ideal for search. This is configured on your Solr core configuration properties. Try to tune your RAM buffer size in Solr config for each core if you're using both, or just one if you're using just one. It's 32 megabytes by default. I could prove that increasing the RAM buffer size to at least 64 has proven to increase performance on Solr, both indexing and searching. So analyze your indexing process. Check not only when you're having problems with the indexing or content indexing or search related problems, don't look only at Solr. Also check the Alfresco repository health, because, for example, indexing triggers, as I said earlier, triggers some processes at the repository level. One of the processes is text extraction, and that process can be intense under heavy concurrency if there's a lot of text extraction going on. So basically the flow is Solr every 15 seconds by default. This is configurable, of course. Asks Alfresco for the new transactions. Alfresco queries the database, see what are the new transactions, reply to Solr. Solr asks, okay, so for these transactions, give me the text extraction for each one of these documents. So you can imagine that this contributes to have overload on the repo side. So when you are troubleshooting Solr, also take a look of what's happening on the repository. Regarding transformations, not only text extraction is a transformation, but also transformations to generate previews, and that nice preview that we see on Alfresco Share, for example. Some of those transformations of specific MIME types, they generate problems, or the transformers are throwing errors, or are not capable of transforming a specific MIME type, and this sometimes hangs the threads that are responsible for doing these transformations. So if we don't have a transformation timeout, setting a transformation timeout is a best practice that will guarantee that even if the transformer cannot do the full transformation, the thread will not be left there hanging trying to do the transformation forever, but it will fall on the timeout and it will be released for further work. Golden rules for Solr indexing. So closely monitor your Solr JVM, especially garbage collection heap usage. Enable the garbage collection logs. Analyzing the garbage collection performance is very, very important, and tuning the garbage collection algorithm. I've had on the field extremely good results just by tuning garbage collection on the Solr side, and really, really, really important results. So this is a very, very important topic, garbage collection on the Solr side. Make sure that we don't have any stop the world pauses, and the garbage collection is executing as should. Ask if you need tracking to happen every 15 seconds, what I was describing earlier. If you can cope with a little bit more of eventual consistency on the search results, maybe 30 seconds for tracking. It's depending on the system that you have, of course. Use a dedicated tracking Alfresco instance. There are several architecture options. Increase your index batch counts to get more results on your indexing web script. This can be configured on the Solr core.properties, raising the index batch. So what are the impacting factors in indexing? So the JVM memory and CPU usage on the repository layer because of text extraction and transformations. JVM memory, CPU, disk I/O, and disk cache size on the Solr layer. This is very important. Solr, as we all know, it's very hungry for memory. So the more memory you throw at Solr, the more memory Solr uses. So actually it needs a lot of memory. So, but this needs to be, if you throw a lot of memory to Solr, but you don't configure the JVM appropriately, you're doing more worse than good. So this is very important. Also, the disk cache size is very important. And to leave enough memory for the operating system when you're sizing a JVM for Solr, let's say with 32 gigabytes, you should pay attention to leave enough memory for the operation system and to build specific operating system caches that will help overall on the Solr performance. Number of threads for indexing, as you know, we can tune that on the Solr side. Let me see how far can we go. Golden rules for Solr search. So have local indices and fast drives, very important. Tune the merge factor to 2, that is ideal for search. Increase the greedy caches. On this case, we are trying to tune for search response time, so we need to increase the greedy caches and the RAM buffer. And we should try to the best of our knowledge to avoid path search queries. Those are known to be slow. Avoid star and all search. Avoid using sort on the Solr queries. You can sort the results on the client side using JS. That's much more performant, or any other client side framework of your choice. But don't use sort on Solr level. You can have a huge impact on performance. Search is more CPU intensive than indexing. So increase CPU power if you want to have more search performance on the Solr box. And again, this is never goes without saying, upgrade your Alfresco release to the latest service packs, because those contain the latest hotfixes, and you can be possibly hitting one of those bugs. So it's a very good practice to upgrade your Alfresco release with the latest service packs. So regarding Solr caches, how can we tune them? The best way that I know to tune the Solr caches is the tracking the uses of the Solr caches themselves. So as you know, the deployment of Alfresco Solr makes available statistics. And if you run this URL here, you'll have statistics on each one of the individual caches. So the way to tune and to look at those results is if you have many evictions on one specific cache, you should probably try to increasing that cache module so that all elements will fit. But of course, don't overdo it because they will consume more memory. So best way is to try and increase little by little and see what impact that cache might have. But if you see a lot of evictions, probably that cache is one of potential candidates from being increased. The goal is to get the hit rate as close as 1 as possible. If you've seen these results of this cache page, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to proceed much more. Let me try to give you a couple more slides, see how far can we go.
I think finish off the stuff you have on Solr, and then we're gonna break off, and I'm gonna invite you to back to Tech Talk Live for a part 2, because I know from your slides that we're just a little over halfway through them, and there's some really good stuff in the rest of your slides. So
yeah,
finish off the Solr stuff you have, and see if you can do that in the next 5 minutes, and we'll do a part 2.
Yeah, I think this will be the last. So this will be the last slide. Then we don't have time for more. So I just wanted to, for the ones that don't know, what and how is Solr used on the Alfresco share. So Solr indexing and search performance, so the tuning that we were referring on the previous slides, will affect positively the overall share performance. This is because share relies on Solr on the following situations. So on the full text search, on the advanced search, on filters, on tags, on categories, on dashlets such as the recently modified documents, and on wildcard searches for people, groups, and sites. Sometimes share is doing requests to Solr even if you don't realize that that's happening. When just by rendering some page or rendering categories, actually share is querying Solr for data. So a healthy Solr represents an healthier share. And that's how much we have time for today, I guess. So looking forward to continue on part 2. Hopefully I was not too boring for you.
Thank you so much for making this presentation and for taking the time. I realized this is a big topic, and I should probably have realized that before we began, that this is going to take 2 sessions to cover. And even on 2 sessions, we're not going to cover everything in depth, but it's been a really, really good session. We had some good discussions on IRC. I got some good comments in private as well. So I will try and set up a part 2 pretty soon, so we can follow up on this one and get the rest of your great slides. I don't think there was any questions towards the end, but yeah, Angel and Douglas both says they want the part 2. Douglas says, let it be the first 2 hours long Tech Talk Live. Yeah, but I have a meeting that starts later, and I can see that the viewers are starting to drop off. So I'd rather do a part 2 and invite you back.
Sure. Yeah, sorry if I was not quick enough. I tried to.
Not at all, not at all. It was some great stuff, and thank you all for attending this session. Like I said, I'll try and set an extraordinary extra Tech Talk Live up, because I actually have the fall fully booked with Tech Talk Lives on record management and some of the new features and the new community edition releases. So I will try and squeeze this one in. It won't be on the normal schedule, but otherwise people can watch the recording. So thank you all for joining, and see you next time.